Senator Rosen, please.
Thank you, Chairman Reed, for holding this critically important hearing. General Walters, I'm sure you understand more than most that the world is watching the United States as we support our NATO allies and help the Ukrainian people defend their country from Vladimir Putin's violent, unprovoked war on their democratic way of life. So with this in mind, earlier this month, I traveled to Poland and Germany as part of a bipartisan CODEL to reinforce to the world that Americans stand united in our support for Ukraine and the Ukrainian people. Throughout the trip, we did have the privilege of meeting U.S. forces supporting the EUCOM mission. We received briefings from commanders on the situation on the ground in Ukraine, and we saw firsthand the security assistance and training NATO is providing. This trip underscored for me that we can and we must do more, taking additional actions to support Ukraine, helping them to defeat Putin's forces. And so I want to just turn to a little bit of talking about humanitarian aid, because in Poland we visited a refugee center where displaced Ukrainians were seeking shelter and refuge from Putin's brutality. And I saw women and children who fled, all women and children primarily, they fled their homes and the lives they'd built. We heard on the ground people in Ukraine are running out of food, water, medical supplies. So, General, what role is EUCOM playing in supporting the U.S. military's humanitarian mission in the Ukraine? And how concerned are you that potential Russian gains might complicate your efforts to provide both the military and humanitarian assistance that they need?
Senator, we're very concerned, and EUCOM is assisting with inventories, transactions back and forth with security assistance as well as humanitarian assistance to make sure that from a supply and demand standpoint, the right stuff goes in at the right time with the best possible force protection. And we will vary as necessary based off trends that exist in the environment to ensure that we can, as best we can, safely get the right goods to the right people at the right time, both from a security assistance standpoint and both from a humanitarian assistance standpoint. As a military organization, we're obviously working side by side with many of our government partners outside of the Department of Defense, as well as those that represent departments outside of the Department of Defense in the countries where these transactions are taking place, Poland and others.
Thank you. I want to move on to cyber threats because obviously you've alluded to it, General Van Ovost, and of course my colleagues as well. But I want to turn to Russian gray zone tactics. Russia has launched malicious cyber attacks to target Ukraine's infrastructure, its government networks, while utilizing disinformation to falsely paint Ukraine, of course, and I'm going to quote here, a Nazi regime. So, General Walters, I have a three-part question for you on Russian hybrid warfare threats. First, have Russian cyber attacks compromised Ukrainian command and control? Second, do we have adequate strategies for countering Russia's information operations in eastern Ukraine? And third, given that NATO in 2014 declared that a cyber attack could lead to the invocation of Article 5, in your view, what should be the threshold for a Russian cyber attack that could lead to invoking Article 5?
Senator, the first question that has to do with Ukrainian C2, as I think most of us have seen in the public domain, the Ukrainian C2 is currently in place from a whole of government perspective on Ukraine's part all the way down to the military. So I would contend that Russia has been very challenged in that area, and Ukraine has been continued to be successful. I think the strategic implications are profound, and I believe that when we examine what has taken place up to this point and write books about it in the future, we'll look back and conclude and be comfortable with the fact that we have dramatically, from a U.S. perspective and NATO perspective, improved our tactics, techniques, and procedures as they contribute to a campaign in the area of offensive cyber and defensive cyber, and as well as the manipulation of how information comes out and how we can ensure that the truth still gets to the appropriate point. And I would just say that when it comes to what NATO does to declare an Article 5, as a military commander, what I'm responsible for is ensuring that we have all of the facts And as you well know, Senator, we typically wind up in situations to where the next day after we quickly discover that we didn't have all the facts. And what I would owe the North Atlantic Council and NATO so that they can make the appropriate decision is to give as many of those facts as I can and provide my best military advice to the North Atlantic Council that would be responsible for making that decision, all 30 nations, about whether or not to enact Article 5. And in situations like this, when it comes to cyber, it's very difficult to get the facts, and you have to work hard to make sure that you get those, and that would be my responsibility at the time when that would occur.
Thank you. I see my time is up, but General Van Oost, I'll take this for the record about investing in the right cyber talent and modernizing IT capabilities in order to support all of this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.